Between now and roughly 1 p.m. To think about the concept of human rights in Africa. This is a book I read in the mid-1990s. Like Kamata, occasionally people ask me about CODESRIA in the 1970s. And Dar es Salaam, University of Dar es Salaam always features somewhere. Which is why I have made it a habit that when I'm in the region, I sneak through Dar es Salaam. And I've also made it a habit to pass not just by the university, but to visit friends, colleagues, mentors, comrades who have had a major impact on the work that CODESRIA does. So on one of those occasions when I sneaked into town, Mwalimu Shivji figured out I was in town. I don't know how, but she figured out that I was in town and invited me for dinner, which I gladly agreed because food is central to how I survive. During that dinner, he raised the point that there had been some concern in some quarters that a book of the caliber of the concept of human rights in Africa, which did not just have serious impact at the intellectual level, it's actually been a book cited in various jurisprudential discussions, was missing on the shelves. That's roughly how he put it. So I unfortunately decided on the spur of the moment to say we can produce the next edition. I must be honest, I had no idea it was possible because though I lead a research organization that is a leading publisher on the continent, everyone else does the work and I get the praise for it when it's good work. So we walked out of the dinner with the agreement that we were going to try a second edition. So on my way from his house to where I was staying, I sent a message to the production manager, a lady by the name of Shifao, who has been in CODESRIA for a long time. And she said, don't worry, we have technology that will scan the old copy because it was never kept in soft copy in 1989 when the book was published. And then there will be some slippages here and there, so we'll package it nicely. And maybe within a week, we will have a soft copy of the old edition of the book, which actually happened within 2 days. They had already scanned and they sent me sort of a distorted version of this book. And from there, we've done everything possible to make sure that the book is not just ready, but printed, ready for this launch. So I also have the rare privilege of having worked with Mwalimu Shivji before. Again, as it happens, we were on the corridors during a previous CODESRIA General Assembly, talking about interesting things all over. And then the idea came that he had written numerous essays, some of which were published but in obscure places, and we needed to bring them together into one volume so that it could be easily accessible to as many people as possible. And I do remember at the time, I think Firoz Manji was passing by. And again, like it happened over dinner the other day, I agreed to put those essays together into a collection that is comes under the title, Where is Uhuru? Which is a collection of essays. And the reason why I thought that it would be good to have this introductory remark is because the panel we are going to have for the book launch has Walter Bgoya, who has published Issa Shivji severally. And there is a method to the madness that we did over dinner and the one we did over the General Assembly, instantly deciding that we are going to produce a book within a short time. For me, my experience has been a serious learning experience. And actually, a mentoring experience. There is a general feeling with younger academics today that mentoring is this formalized process where you meet once every while and you discuss the challenges that we face. But actually, in the old days, without saying it, mentoring used to happen on the corridors of conferences that we held in very many different places. And I have learned quite a bit from this experience. Perhaps for me, the most interesting one was sending Issa a bunch of chapters that needed his eye so that we could proceed with the editorial process and all that, and jumping on a flight on my way to Abidjan from Nairobi, only to arrive in Abidjan and he had already cleared with a bunch of essays that I thought were going to take him a few days to work on. So I want to appreciate this as a basis of beginning the engagement with the launch of this book. It is appropriate that we are doing it at the University of Dar es Salaam. And it's even more appropriate that we're doing it around a theme on human rights. Because there is a sense in which human rights often gets treated as this esoteric thing that comes on the bandwagon of an NGO, which then goes to teach the people who are already practicing human rights. You go to teach them human rights. The most powerful statement that got me clued into this book is actually the first paragraph of the old edition of this book, which I just thought I should read. Issa begins chapter 1 of the book, writing, "Human rights discourse has become one of the main growth points of the academic industry in the last 15 years. The output of literature on human rights in Africa has been enormous. I want you to hang on to that against just give me a moment, against the preface which he writes, the human rights discourse on Africa and in Africa is intellectually backward, he says, even by the standards of the African social science. That would not matter if it was also ideologically innocent. That it is not. Human rights talk constitutes one of the main elements in the ideological armory of imperialism." I think this is a useful departure point for the kind of discussion we want to have. Because I think in this book, both in its old edition and in the new edition, you've tested the boundaries of what human rights does to us. So I would like to stop there and ask Walter Bgoya to speak first to the experience of publishing Issa Shivji, and then I will ask Professor Issa Shivji to speak to the book, and then I will invite Professor WILLY Mutunga, Emeritus CJ, Republic of Kenya, to react but also lead us into a formal launch of the book. So in that order, welcome Walter. I'm not going into a deep introduction of Walter because, as someone said, if you don't know him, whom do you know? If you've read anything published by Mkuki wa Nyota, that is the person. Mkuki na Nyota. The Kenyan in me was revealed in my Swahili. Welcome, Walter.
This is weird a little bit. Know him, who do you know? Gosh. Unafahamu, mimi ni mmoja wa wale watu wanaosema bwana, Kiswahili lazima tukitumie katika mihadhara ya science. Sio mihadhara ya kunywa pombe tu na kupiga bla bla. Lazima tupe hadhi ya Kiswahili, tuzungumze katika mikutano ya kimataifa na kadhalika. Lakini sasa kwa sababu hakuna wakalimani na watafsiri na wengine hapa hawafahamu Kiswahili, itakuwa si uungwana mimi kuendelea kuzungumza katika Kiswahili. Kwa hiyo bora nirudi kule nifanye kama inavyokuwa kawaida, tuzungumze Kiingereza. Tupo pamoja? Haya. I was a little bit unhappy this morning because the acknowledgements of one after another, Rais Mheshimiwa na Waziri Mkuu Mheshimiwa na Mkuu wa Mkoa Mheshimiwa na DC Mheshimiwa na Katibu Kata Mheshimiwa, and a whole lot of Waheshimiwa, which takes so much precious time instead of going straight to the point. But it has become now a thing. If you don't recognize these people all the time, you probably will lose a job. Since I can't lose a job, let me just say brothers and sisters. Tuendelee, okay? Asante. Now, first of all, thank you, Ngwanza, for including me, but not telling me the whole truth, because I was invited to be part of the launch of this book. And since I was not the publisher of the book, despite playing a little role in facilitating, I thought the launchers would be the publisher, CODESRIA, and the author, and Mheshimiwa ndugu yetu, to make a statement about the subject that discussed in the book. I just thought that I would take part in the cutting of the of the ribbon. But now I realize I was given something I have to say, and I'm very happy to say. First of all, I want to say congratulations, Godwin and Issa, for bringing out a second edition of this book at this particular time when the subject is a very, very real and very relevant. So I am asked to make some remarks about publishing Issa Shivji. And please forgive me if I just say to Issa, this professor and all this type of thing, tunafahamiana. Okay? So, Comrade Issa, I want to make a few remarks about publishing him, but also in the process maybe painting a picture of the situation in the 60s and 70s and 80s in which this book was published. But let me start by saying I did not go to this university. And trust me, not going to this university in this country is a bit of a liability. It's a bit of, what can I say, handicap. Because there is a University of Dar es Salaam tribe. And if you don't belong to the University of Dar es Salaam tribe and its sub-tribe, the Akivaga group, you are kind of marginal to what happens. And so, since I did not go to the University of Dar es Salaam, but hung around the University of Dar es Salaam, sometimes I wasn't sure what people thought about me. I wasn't quite a comrade. I was kind of a fellow traveler. Somebody who we don't really quite understand. He studied in America, right? Hatujui huyu bwana. But then, as it turned out, I had been engaged in the United States in struggles that were almost more even dangerous than the ones that were being waged at the university here. And somehow my view was, what do they take themselves for? Have they really known what struggle is all about? But then, at that time, and again, I was working in the foreign ministry. And just assumed he works for the foreign ministry. What do you mean? Of course, he must be part of the system. And again, being part of the system, being around academics, poses some problems. When actually the real people in the system who are academicians and were carrying on, no one suspected. But we came to learn later that they had been recruited and trained while they were here. Anyway, so although said, if you don't know me, who do you know? Let me just make a few remarks about myself, because that will situate me and explain how I got into publishing the kind of works I published and the kind of persona that deals with that kind of work. Okay, just mention that I was in the US in the 60s, in this capitalist racist society, for almost 5 years, waging struggles there. And I came back here, joined the foreign ministry, and then 1960, in the foreign ministry I dealt with Africa issues and met many of the people in the liberation movements, made some friends there, and learned a lot, actually. In some ways, my formation was through those contacts, both at the practical and ideological level. In 1968, I was transferred to Ethiopia, and this Ethiopia was probably the only really feudalist society that we had in Africa under Haile Selassie. And coming from Tanzania of the Arusha Declaration into Addis of that period, we were always suspect also. And also I had some connections with students who were struggling there, and that did not make me a very popular person in the eyes of the people there. Then fast forward, from there when I went to China, and this was during the Cultural Revolution, and trust me, it was a challenge, because now I know, don't laugh, but this, men, have you ever been in a situation where you can stay for a month without seeing a woman? I'm not talking about having anything to do her, seeing a woman. Huh? I say, unafahamu habari. Ukapiga 5-6 months. I'm not talking about seeing, because everybody at the time was wearing the same uniform, blue or green, with short hair, and you weren't quite sure. In any case, there was no contact at that time. So, but while I was there also, I had a chance to go to Vietnam and during the war, and North Korea, Pyongyang. But as I say now, in this whole period, one is gathering almost in a kind of osmotic way ideas, perceptions, and even feelings about what's all about struggling for an idea. And the Cultural Revolution was, of course, extremely interesting. This was also the time when Chairman Mao and Zhou Enlai had decided to support the building of the Tazara Railway when the capitalist countries had refused to, and so on. Okay, so now, then I came back, and I realized at the time that diplomacy was not really my calling. So I left. And let me also state that actually it was a comrade, Harko Bagat, who recruited me to join the publishing house. So when I joined the publishing house, there was an Englishman, Robert Hutchison, who was a progressive fellow. And the first manuscript that came that we had to publish was Silent Class Struggle. Now, we had a meeting of the chairman of the board who asked, what is this thing about silent class struggle? There's no class struggle in this country. What's this all about? And why should you publish this book? Anyway, Robert Hutchison, he said, well, we must publish this book because it's one of the most interesting books about Tanzania and so on. The chairman, who was the well-known and Sir George Kahama, said to him, well, I don't think so. And Robert Hutchison said, well, in that case, then I'm going to resign. So George Kahama looked at me and said, and you, because I had just come in and this was really the first meeting, and you, what do you think? I took a moment and I said, if he resigns, I will also resign. So Sir George was a very clever man. He said, okay, let me think about it, and I'll come back to you. Anyway, we came to learn later that he went to Mwalimu Nyerere and said, look, that these people want to publish this terrible book about silent class struggle, and I'm over a mind to stop this. And I would like to have your opinion about this, Mwalimu. Mwalimu, my job is to govern this country. I'm president of this country. My job is to run this country. The publishers have the job of publishing books. Let everyone do their job, which was absolutely wonderful. That sealed for us. It was a test case. And after that, we have had fairly smooth sailing. Well, smooth sailing in a manner of speaking, because the rough seas are never quite, you can't really always have smooth sailing. But nobody else after that dare asked us what we publish and what we do not publish. So this was the first edition of Silent Class Struggle. And let me also say the beautiful cover designed by guess who? WB. You know. Now this looks, this looks pretty miserable by present standards, but trust me, the work of bringing this book was not easy, because this was done when there was no computer, and everything was literally line word by word arranged in hot metal, and cut and pass was actually cutting with a scissor and putting glue and pasting and making sure the line is straight. And we did all that and managed to produce this work. And when it came out, of course, the first thing we did was to smell it. And oh, how wonderful the smell of ink from the printer. You know, this is absolutely joy. You know, like the British, you know, fish and chips. Fish and chips were always wrapped in newspapers. And when the chips were put on the newspaper, the ink would melt and go into the chips. And that's what gave fish and chips its taste, you know. So, you know, I'm doing here, oh yes, I mean, real chips. Fish and chips, chips my eye hasn't gone that my eye, but that's the British fish and chips. It has to have some of this newspaper smell, you know. Anyway, so we did this book, and after that we did other books. We did tourism and socialist development, and that also was very interesting. And at that time, Issa at Bgoya University and the Town Youth League was very, very adamant about tourism and its negative effects on our society. And you know, the kind of decadence that were coming from the West, the kind of, you know, the differentiation, the pride in the you know, incomes of people, and so on and so forth. And basically that this was a way to penetrate our countries to stop progressive ideas, and this is the Cold War, and so on and so forth. And the debate was quite furious. In fact, it's billed as one of the most radical discussions in the newspapers in the 60s, 1969 especially. And we published that one, and then we went to publish quite a few more books by Issa Shivji, quite a few. I don't know whether I should mention some of them, but there were others in this political science series, Henry Mapolu's Workers and Management, and then of course this Silent Class Struggle was published, also reissued with Heinemann as Class Struggles in Tanzania a couple of years later after we published it. Things were getting better. This was actually done in UK and not done here. But there were other books published, and there is a long list. Constitutional Legal System Tanzania, Pan-Africanism or Pragmatism, Lessons of the Tanganyika-Zanzibar Union, Accumulation in African Periphery, Rule of Law, Rule of Law versus Rulers of Law, and then the magnum opus biography of Mwalimu, which you see is probably our most interesting work in terms of seriously engaging with Tanzania politics, history, and so on. Now, let me say that from my experience, one of the very interesting and almost, how can I say, heroic work we did there was to publish the Salaam University debate on class, state, and imperialism, which was edited by Yash Tandon. Now, I cannot let you guys understand the fire, the passion, the vitriol that came out of that debate. It was absolutely incredible. And I mean, you couldn't be a comrade without taking a side. But as a publisher, you had to be very careful which side you show to belong to, because it could mean all kinds of things. So I had to tread a very thin, rope. There was Comrade Issa Shivji, Karim Hirji on one hand, and there was Dan Abdere and Yashtad on the other, and all other comrades in between. And my goodness, I am telling you, the things they called each other are absolutely astounding. There was, running dog of imperialism. There was, liquidationist, Trotskyite, social imperialist, Mensheviks, and all kinds of names. I mean, you name it, there was a name for a comrade who was not towing the line. But which line? That's a good question. And I had to survive that, which meant that I was pretty hypocritical on both sides, if you're short. I mean, but because I really wanted the debate to go on, and the publisher could not come out, because then, I'll give you an example. One day, actually, a couple of comrades came to see me to tell me why the other comrades were absolutely wrong, and why we should not encourage this kind of thinking. So as I discussed with them, my secretary came to me and whispered and said, two other comrades have come to see you. The two comrades were on the other side. So I said, how do these two meet in my office? There probably will be fireworks or something. So I tell my secretary to find some way to let the one group go so I could get the other group out. Because ideological debates were serious stuff here. It was not for the faint-hearted. So we did that book, and I dare say, and this was extremely important, that we learned a lot in the process. And Comrade Issa and those other comrades who were engaged in this debate, and sometimes, I'll be honest, I thought, couldn't we have some less cumbersome and less fighting talk and have just simple texts for young people about Marxism without all these obscure sources that are being quoted in these debates. One comrade told me, you know what? You must change your attitude. Marxism is important because it's so difficult to understand. I said, oh. You understand what I mean? Marxism is so important because it's so difficult to understand. I'm still grappling actually with this idea because it's not as superficial it might seem because, you know, I think, yes, grappling with those ideas, trying to understand, helps also clarify and strengthen maybe your understanding. But definitely one would also wish that there's easier communication of these ideas. And I think even more so now when the young people are so confused about what is going on. Now, this is getting a bit too out of hand. I should try to stop. But let me say two things before I stop. One, as one gets on in age, one begins to understand what it means comrade. Because one has also seen comrades come and go. Comrades being bought, comrades being put into positions where being comrade is seen as being against the state and so on. And so everybody tries to hide that they were once comrades. Or, as the case may be, comrades now beginning to find meaning in evangelical texts. And to the form does tell you this is a comrade. And it is not simple. I'm saying this in a way to thank Comrade Issa for remaining who he has been for all these years, for not selling out, and for understanding also that not everybody who says comrade is a comrade. Because there are some people who are here who thought having a beer, doing what every 23, 4-year-old man and girl do, chase each other, and thought the only way to do it, most important, is to drink milk. You know who I mean? You don't? Come on. You must know. This comrade who was the left of the left, the closest comrade of Walter Rodney. You know who I mean. Yeah, and now keeps a lot of cattle and has forgotten what imperialism is about, although he was shouting on the top of his voice that imperialists and these leaders who stay in power should be thrown out and to the sea. Well, anyway, Comrade Issa, thank you very much. And let me also say, yes, I think this is correct. This is correct. Because you also understand the agony of the present. When Tanzania cannot even make a statement about what's going on in Gaza. This, you need a comrade to be with you to understand this. Yes, this because it's that bad. It is that bad. And when we were discussing in the other sessions about democracy and all, we'll have to come back. What do all these things mean? You know, words. So, thank you, Comrade Issa. Let me end by saying, by the way, yes, I know. Godwin, thank you very much also. Because Godwin and CODESRIA have been our good friends also. We work together. We haven't worked sufficiently enough together, but we will work together. let me say also how extremely fantastic my life has been thanks to engaging with ideas of Shivji and other comrades, and that I'm sure I'll have a few more years because I'm still engaging with those ideas. How is that?
Thank you very much, Walter Bgoya. I have learned a thing or two that I didn't know, and I am happy that my colleagues, Dr. Kamata, was able to put you on the program with all the weaknesses in communication considered. So thank you very much. When we started working on this book, we also took a decision that Professor Issa Shivji was going to write a new introduction. And I think you were traveling to the US around that time. So when I wrote to you and said, okay, it looks like it's going to happen, we need an introduction. And his entry point in that introduction starts with the Gulf, not the Gulf, the intervention in Iraq, and takes us to the discussion around global NATO's attack on Libya. At the time when we did this, we didn't know that we'd be launching the book in the current state where the genocidal war that is happening in Gaza is happening. But perhaps for me, even more depressing is that a university in Gaza was bombed. At least that's what the news says, that Al-Azhar University in Gaza was bombed. That university came into life after the late Yasser Arafat declared the need for there to be a university in Palestine. Those of us in the university have been socialized to assume that there is an ivory tower. But actually it doesn't exist anymore. Institutions like universities are fair game in war. I've seen communications from Mwalimu Issa Shivji on some of these issues. So it's perhaps important that you reflect not just about the book, but what it means today. So I want to welcome you to speak to the book.
Thank you, Godwin. Thank you, Walter. I'm amazed at the way Godwin and Walter could excavate those memories, because many of the things they were saying I've actually forgotten. And by the way, Godwin, that dinner that you talked about, the person who was behind it and facilitated it was my partner Parin, who is here. And by the way, she is also the person who made sure with a whip in her hand that I finished writing the concept of human rights in Harare. Walter touched on the debate and so accurately recalled the atmosphere at the time. But I must say he did a good job of walking on a very thin fence. And one of the good jobs he did, that he got Babu, Abdul Rahman Muhammad Babu, to write the introduction. And Babu was not only a Marxist, but a good diplomat as well, the way he wrote. So that saved both Babu and Walter from being identified with one or the other side. Comrades, friends and colleagues, at this time, it is so difficult to talk about human rights. When humanity itself is being devastated by the horrific murder of children, men and women in Gaza. How do you talk about human rights when human beings themselves are being destroyed, when the dignity is being destroyed, when the countries, places of worship, places of education are sending into ruins? Just the other day there was a report that all the 11 universities of Gaza have been bombed. In this time, it is so difficult to talk about human rights. When I wrote this book, finished the manuscript in 1988, the Berlin Wall had not fallen yet. Soviet Union had not disintegrated. Gulf Wars had not happened. Somalia, Libya, Iraq, and Afghanistan had not been decimated. When I wrote the introduction to the second edition, all that had happened. And Godwin touched on that I discuss and talk about the Libyan war. But Gaza had not yet happened. And you will see in my original book that I was still hopeful. I characterized human rights, the dominant discourse, as part of the ideology of imperialism. But I also believed and argued that human rights as a discourse could be reconceptualized, could be reconfigured, could be put on its head to become an ideology of resistance for the people to struggle against the domination, against their oppression. When I finished writing the introduction to the second edition, I began to argue, that we have to go beyond human rights talk. It was not a question of reconceptualizing, but it was a question of interrogating the very epistemology of human rights. I had started doing that in the first edition when I isolated and analyzed the philosophical foundations of human rights and the political use to which human rights was put. Very briefly, the argument was the center to the philosophical premises of human rights was, on the one hand, individualism, and the other hand of abstracting the human being from society and abstracting from the fact that human being is a social being. But the individualism that I was talking at the time was the individualism of the Enlightenment period. It was the individualism of the Enlightenment period. There were aspects of it which could be rescued, which you could call broadly progressive. But then came the attack from neoliberalism. Then came the attack from neoliberalism, which is premised not an enlightened individualism. It is premised on a hedonist individual. An individual who is told is what matters is his or her self-interest. It cultivates selfishness. It preaches love thyself, love yourself. It has not an iota of enlightenment in it. That's the individual of neoliberalism. And how could you even argue about the individual being a social being when Margaret Thatcher, the famous declaration by her, what society? There is no society. Remember? There are only individuals. There is no society. How do you talk about social being if there is no society? That's the ideology that ruled us for the last 2-3 decades. And that's the ideology we embraced, lock, stock, and barrel. Not only the politicians, but even in the academia. If there was a time at this university where the debates, discussions, and progressive academic, which was the trademark of this university in the 70s, 80s, and part of 90s, was destroyed, as Christine mentioned. It was because of the neoliberalization of our university. They did not simply disappear. It was part of the overall onslaught of neoliberalism on our universities. There was a time when there was so much fear on this campus to talk, to discuss, because there was fear of surveillance. There was a time that 2 or 3 students could not meet together. There was, I'm saying was, I'm hoping it has gone. And Christian must make sure that it has gone. That you could not invite someone to give a public lecture. You must get Kibali. We became a Kibali society. And you must apply for Kibali a month ahead and say who is coming, what is going to talk, why are you inviting. And before you can do that, you must get the Kibali. Public lectures, public debates died. Literally, they died. I don't know how many months ago, WILLY was visiting. I proposed to the Dean of the School of Law. WILLY is an alumni. Why don't we invite him to give a lecture? I was told there's protocol to be followed. You cannot invite a former Chief Justice without informing the Chief Justice, who should have time to receive him. For me, it came as a shock because I was just not used to these protocols. Willy, for me, was a comrade, a former alumni of this university. Why can't he come to this campus? It never happened. I'm glad, and I thank Mwaza and Christine for getting here without being told that you need to follow protocol. And I'm glad also he doesn't follow any protocol either. This is the situation we are in. And now on top of it, we are getting what we are witnessing every day on our screens. In this situation, how do you talk about human rights? How can you pontificate about rights? We are used to progressive. We are used to talk about double standards of human rights. We used to talk about hypocrisy of human rights. Today, what double standards? There is no standard to start with. So how can you talk about double standards? Where is the standard? The only standard imperialism follows today is violence, is war. Today, imperialism has brought us on the precipice of World War III. Once Einstein was asked, what do you think will be the weapons of World War III? Einstein said, I don't know what will be the weapons of World War III, but I know what will be the weapons of World War IV. Stones and spears. And that we are witnessing in front of our eyes. This is the situation that we are witnessing. And as Walter mentioned, and I want to underscore it, for a Tanzanian, for a progressive Tanzanian who has lived through all these times, and you have seen much, it is so shameful. It is so shameful. Not that there is no statement from the powers that be, but even having simply a peaceful march is not allowed. Hakuna kibali. The other day, 4 or 5 football fans had Palestinian flag in their hands. They were arrested. But all over the streets of Dar es Salaam, you would see Israel's flag. This is the situation we are in, comrade. People are fearful. This university, very much unlike its tradition, has not said a word. When Iraq war happened, we had a symposium. We discussed the implications of Iraq war. When major events took place in the world, the university always discussed, the university led. And people recognized this university by that standard. And they believed in the university. The university was credible. Today, not. I really wanted to establish the context in which this symposium, this colloquium is taking place. And in the context of the launching of this book. I am saying, as intellectuals, as committed intellectuals, you have to seriously interrogate epistemology of human rights and go beyond it. We have to go beyond the barbarism of capitalism and capitalist imperialism to human civilization based on solidarity. I said all these things, and we agonize over it. Many of us agonize over it. Many of us agonize over it. But, humanity is not dead. Humanity is waking up. Witness what is going on all over the world. Millions of people protesting, demonstrating. Young people. The language of the sins of imperialism is coming back. What imperialism has done to humanity is coming back. The other day, you saw in your video clips, the young people in the US were hanging on the ship which was supposed to carry arms to Israel. For 5 hours and more, they kept hanging there. When you talk about heroism, it's never the heroism of individuals. It's the heroism of the masses. And these are the heroes. So, in spite of saying what I've said, I think we are witnessing an extremely important conjuncture. And in spite of all the agony and the pain that we feel, of course we feel, because we are human beings. In spite of that, there still is hope. Humanity is not dead. Let me end there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Shivji. In the language that we are used to, I think what you describe as an interesting conjuncture is a revelation of the contradictions of capitalism and imperialism and the manner in which it manifests itself. It's my pleasure to invite Comrade CJ, Emeritus, to come and both speak to the book, but also eventually lead us into a brief moment of launching the book. Then I will pick up from there with the rest of the details. Comrade CJ. I hope the protocol was enough.
Yeah, that's okay. You know, I would have loved to talk to you in Kiswahili, but, you know, Kenyans are very afraid of speaking Kiswahili to Tanzanians. Very afraid. And I remember once Mkapa came to Kenya. Moi had just stolen the election. And so he was one of the invited guests. And he spoke to Kenyans in Kiswahili. And I've told this story, so if you have heard it before, forgive me. So he said, yaliyopita si ndwele, tugange yaliyopo na yajayo. Even for me, who had studied here in Dar es Salaam, I didn't know what ndwele was. So I got hold of my kamusi and I found out what it was. And I realized Kenyans had clapped for Mkapa for saying that the election was stolen and move on. Yeah, so I'm happy to be back, in Dar es Salaam. And I wanted to say, in 1989, when this book was published, I was doing my doctorate in Toronto, Osgood or Osco. And of course, the Soviet Union collapsed, and as you can imagine, in a university setting where there was basically a liberal university, although there were Foucauldians there and Marxists as well. So there was a discussion. But in those discussions, and I was preparing to write a thesis on contracts, it was a very, 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 a very uncertain time, you know, for somebody who studied in Dar, whose intellectual development and ideological development was from this particular university, to get that confidence, you know, shaken. But there are 3 books, you know, that studied me up. The 2 of them published by you. The TPH. There was of course, the Issa Shivji's book in the one we discussing the first edition. Then there was this book by Lucas Kamisi, which was published on, you know, Imperialism Today. That was the title. And I believe it was an extension of the Dar debate on class, state, and imperialism. And when that debate was taking place, I was doing my master's here. And I think Bgoya described it very well. For a student, you know, who wants to get his master's, and my professor was Nabudere, Nabudere was supervising my thesis. So, you know, but I thought it was, you know, a great debate. And I'm happy that was published. So I read this debate while I was in Toronto, and then I realized that there were, you know, there were basic truths that the Fukuyama's book, you know, The End of History, couldn't dismantle. And the third book was when Nabudere himself was in Denmark in 1989. He wrote a manuscript which unfortunately hasn't been published. And its title was A Critique of the Political Economy of Social Imperialism. He wrote that when he was in, Denmark. And his argument was that what collapsed in the Soviet Union was not socialism. And it tracked the polemics, between the various communist parties in the 50s in particular, China and the Albanians, Enver Hoxha, who are still criticizing what was happening in Soviet Union. And so he said those who are in charge were not socialists. I think he called them social bureaucrats, bourgeoisie. And so that was also comforting, that, everybody, saying this is the end of history, but there's some writing which just said the opposite. And those debates are still continuing. There's a book that has come out, The Afterlives of Chinese Communism. Maybe, I'm not sure I'm getting the title right, but continuing that debate. Samir Amin has written on it, Walter Rodney, and there are, various other scholars who have dealt with this, this issue. So when you look at the Shivji now, the your introduction, it falls into that, trajectory of not only continuing to discuss, imperialism, discuss, this development that people are calling the emergence of, multipolar world. There's BRICS. So there is, in my view, there is hope. There is hope. In Nairobi, when I meet young people, I normally tell them this story that I don't know whether it's true, but it's about a Ugandan who formed a political party, and the objective of this political party was that the British should come back. And so when the elections took place, he got only 2 votes. So he asked his wife, "I thought this was a noble idea. How did I lose?" The wife tells him, "You are ignorant. The British never left. That's why you lost." That's why you lost. So, and we see that. We see, in Kenya, we just King Charles III has just been in Nairobi, and there were quite a number of demonstrations. The young people even strapped a banner, around the statue of Kimathi, right? Basically asking Charles to let us have Kimathi's remains, because he has not had a decent burial. And we know that the British and the Kenyan government know exactly where Kimathi was buried. So the British didn't leave. I wrote a piece when Prince Charles was there, raising a constitutional argument, and this constitutional argument was, our constitution allows public participation. It's there. It's a value of governance, and so I was saying the people of Kenya didn't, and this is part of the policy. We have never debated it. The president is sending policemen to Haiti. We didn't participate. He has decided to side with Israel. We didn't participate. He has decided to invite our landlord without a conversation. And so I basically told Charles, safe travels, but when you come next, find out if we have participated in, inviting you to this country. So I think Shivji has talked about the state of the planet. One of the books that tells the story of American bombings is a book with the title, Why the World Hates America. And there is a chapter in that book that chronicles the bombings from 1899 when they exterminated the Native Indians, Native Americans, sorry. And it ends, in Iraq. So he leaves out, Afghanistan 3, Libya, Syria, and now, Gaza. And when you look at those who have been bombed, okay, it's horrifying that that kind of system should still be in existence. But there was always resistance. I think historians tend to look at domination and not resistance, and that's why I thought your approach of in the first edition and even this one of looking at this dominant discourse, but also the resistance to it. And I think what we are seeing in America and the rest of the world, it gives us hope. It's like when George Floyd was killed and the Black Lives Matter movement just, of course it was there, but it became very prominent because if I didn't actually realize how global Africa looks like until those demonstrations took place, and I'm seeing the same demonstrations over Gaza, and there's a hope there, but it's the question that we're asking ourselves is what kind of planet are we envisioning? A planet, is this system just? Is it egalitarian? Is it ecologically safe? Isn't it sexist? Okay, it's not gender just. It has a lot of inhumanity, yes, and that's what we have to deal with. That's background for me is important, and I think Issa gives. Can I have that? I think Issa gives us, when you look at the last reflections he has in the second, in the introduction to the second edition, is the struggle for democracy and the place of human rights struggle. That is, that one. And I'll just read the last paragraph on page 28. It is this larger picture that we have attempted to locate the human rights ideology and the rights struggle. In this we see the reconstituted rights ideology at once as a critique of imperialist human rights ideology, at the same time an ideology of mobilization and legitimization of the struggles of the working people. And rights struggles and rights ideology may be seen as components of new democratic struggles in the process of democratic revolution. I dare say, I was telling Emil that I'm writing, some manuscript on transformative constitution, and I always have to go back to it because of what Shivji writes. And now, I have to consider what I'm going to change. Okay, that was my second point. My third point is that one I was making about transformative constitutions, and you know, they have, like the Kenyan one, you know, what we call a progressive, Bill of Rights, and Issa has come, as also. Did you come to Nairobi, or you when we were launching the constitution from the middle? I think it was virtual. Yeah, it was virtual, and he dealt with this issue of transformative constitutions. And the first thing he said was, revolutions make constitution. Constitutions don't make revolutions. But he said, but constitutions matter. And he said exactly, how they matter, and he dealt with the issue of sites of struggle within those constitutions, coming up with political demands, out of, the provisions of that constitution. And some of us have been doing that, because if I can give the example of land, for example, in Kenya, the Constitution protects private property, under Article 40 of the Constitution. But in trying to mitigate it, talks about the commons, it talks about the grabbed lands should be returned to the state. And there is one, Article 68, that states that Parliament should legislate on the minimum and maximum acreage. Parliament hasn't done that, because you see, the Kenyatta family has 500,000 hectares, I think. Kibaki and Moi have another 1 million, and then the other billionaires who Oxfam says 8,300, who own assets equal to the rest of us, 50 million. They own, millions and millions of stark inequality in terms of land. So Parliament hasn't touched that, and their struggles say we need this done. And then there's the issue of community land, which the Constitution decrees that if people don't want the land to be commodified, particularly communities, they want common grazing areas, they want common watering areas, then that land should not be commodified. And of course, there is the issue provision for, acquiring land compulsorily. So we're seeing that in our constitution as sites of struggle, but we quickly realized, and I think it's Professor Kibwana was asked about the constitution, and he said, yeah, the constitution is a beautiful baby. We birth a beautiful baby, but look who we gave the baby to, child traffickers. So what did you expect? People who traffic in children and body parts. So that realization also has been very interesting in terms of the struggles for, alternative, political leadership that can actually implement that constitution. There's Shivji might not know this, but in Kenya there is a network called Organic Intellectuals Network. And I don't think Gramsci said that organic intellectuals must be domesticated. They can be connected. They could be great auxiliaries to social movements even outside their own countries. And these are the social justice movements in Kenya, and Shivji knows quite a number. Issa knows quite a number of those. And there's something about them that's important, in the sense that they read a lot of your works. I think your book on NGOs. They read it, and there's a lot of reading, and these are when you come to see them, these are self-educated, young people, but they read. They read a lot, and Walter Rodney and Shivji, and even Ngugi. There's in Mathare a book club called Matingari, which is one of Ngugi's books. And I think that's also, a case for hope. People who are reading. And also Kenya has the Communist Party of Kenya. I was telling Issa that I think their communism is frozen in 1917. They actually have the Bolshevik flag, hammer and sickle, and but they are committed to implementing the constitution. You have another party, the Revolutionary Socialist League in Nairobi as well. I think when you came to Nairobi, there were quite a number of those young people who saw your great film. And then there are the Social Democrats, United Green Movement, and another party called WILLY. And there is a talk of in Kenya now of a united progressive front of the left, whatever the left is. But there is a discussion about that. And I remember giving those study groups this review of your book by Paul O'Connor. I think I got it from you. So I sent it to them, and this is what this reviewer says, actually. He says, much like the Ogia's declaration, Shivji's work has not received the attention that it merits. This is no doubt in part due to the very relationships of imperial and neo-colonial hierarchy that Shivji himself identified, but it is also because Shivji's critique of human rights and attempt to reconceptualize human rights in the service of revolutionary struggles is far less palatable than the petty bourgeois and the pseudo-radical critiques that leave the sense of imperialism and class struggle, untouched. So there is, again, as I was saying, these particular groups, it's a welcome movement. So I wanted to end. I was tempted to do what judges do. You doze off through the hearing, and when you wake up, you say you have heard what your learned friends have said, judges, and you have nothing useful to add. But I wasn't asleep, and I think I heard what was said, and I endorse it. Now the last thing is it's a story about the man you are talking about, in Dar. He didn't say who it was, but it's Museveni, okay? So let's... yeah, Museveni studied, in Dar es Salaam. He was the chair of the University of African Students Revolutionary Front. And actually in Dar, I was convinced that he helped us, as students, deal with what he called academic terrorists. People who in class would, if you put up your hand and say, you are interfering with the train of my thought, sit down. So Museveni, there are a few stories about Museveni. You can read Karim Hiriji's book on Cheche, right? You get a great story there about the rag day and how it was abolished. But what I remember is as a first year, I stopped Museveni and asked him, you seem to have good arguments about why this rag day should be abolished, because it's an abuse to the poor and also socialism in Tanzania. And he was just looking at me and said, what year are you? I said, in first year. And so he said, students are supposed to be told, not to be consulted. And I've always remembered those words by, Kaguta, Museveni. And I never actually saw him without military fatigues. And I know he had bodyguards, right? He had bodyguards. I don't know what his fear was. The last thing about Museveni, somebody wrote on the board. Was it Fakit Rolo? I think it's So Pishoto who tells that story. He wrote on the board, all the great leaders, of the world are dead. He mentions Marx, mentioned Modelaine, I think, from Lumumba, Engels, and then full stop. And he said, I myself am not feeling too well. He was quite a character. The last time I met Museveni was in 2013 when I was swearing in President Uhuru as the president of Kenya. And I sat between him and his wife. And so we talked. He asked after Kenyan, students, and then all of a sudden he asked me a crazy question. Who are you? I thought, what's wrong with this guy? He's probably going to, thinking of, intimidating me or whatever. But our leaders, the story about our leaders is for another day. It's for another day. But I think it's an interesting story, because we should know as East Africans and Africans that the people we vote in as our leaders are not our rulers. The rulers are in the background. Shivji described them. Internally, the compradors. Externally, the imperialist bourgeoisie. And now it's coming very, very, very clear. In the case of Kenya. These are things we laugh about. President Ruto these days is called Nabi Zakayo because of his evangelism. But Zakayo was a tax tax guy, if you remember, in the Bible. He's taxing everything. But I think, nations that oppress other nations also oppress their own people. And that's why I think the solidarity, between a global north and the global south around changes that will give us another planet, is very, 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 very important. And congratulations, Mwalimu, for your this second edition. Don't worry if people don't read your stuff. You just need to read Matthew 13, verse 57, about prophets, what Jesus said about prophets. So you are our prophet in Nairobi, and that's good enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade CJ. While I was listening to him, fortunately I didn't doze. He said something about participation. And I thought it would be a mistake for us to formally launch the book before the people participate. So I'm going to request that we take the mics, and if there is anybody who has an intervention, I have roughly 20 minutes for interventions from the floor. We'll circulate the mics, and if you have a nice thing to say, feel free to say loudly. If you have a nasty thing, I don't know what you need to do, but you can say. So please, if I can spot any hands, I'll pick you. Meantime, I want to, in the process, appreciate in absentia Vijay Prasad, who wrote the foreword to this book within record time. We really did appreciate that. And of course, Mwalimu Shivji mentioned Parin. Both for the dinner. I'm not sure if I said thank you after I finished the dinner that day. If I forgot, thank you, but also for making sure that this project goes through. Amil, in the background, I think, and many other comrades who have played an important role in this. I get the sense that nobody wants to say anything. Oh, okay. I'm waiting for your hand to go up. Can I start with you? Okay, please.
Thank you very much. Congratulations, Professor Shivji. This is indeed a great book, and I think it is one of those invaluable pieces that should actually be kept right next to a mantle somewhere. And I also want to thank Professor Emeritus. What a great way of actually trying to introduce a really nice piece which everyone should actually take in stride in looking forward to how change can actually be manipulated. And I also want to congratulate the publisher, Walter, Bgoya, for having had the courage, and especially at this time, a time where it looks very bleak outside, for any kind of divergent voices to emerge and to actually speak of something which is really happening at the very moment, a genocide taking place in Gaza. I know I will speak tomorrow about something, but for today, I want to throw the challenge back to us. Is this piece only going to be part of what we keep in our bookshelves? How do we move this conversation away from just the academic pondering that we are going to have. What do we do next now that we have this information with us? What next then? Because this is always going to remain within the circles of academic engagement. What is the game plan? How do you move from here, knowing what is happening? How do you move from here to actualize so that we are not under the thumb of the people who are behind the scenes taking charge of our countries? This game plan, if we do not have it, those in leadership will only end up speaking to ourselves. It will never change. And this is the reason why I went into a political leadership of the university, because I believe in action. I believe in moving forward and seeing through that not only are we having intellectual athleticism, but then we can always move forward and do something. And this is the difference, I think, that actually exists between the intellectuals of the 70s. Right now, I sit in a position which CJ Emeritus actually sat in before at the University of Nairobi. But he was willing, at the cost not only of his life, but the cost of his career. How many of us are willing to do that? That is the challenge. And I think as the writer, the publisher, and the forward person has actually given us, then it is up to us to keep asking ourselves, then what next? Thank you.
Thank you very much. There is an intervention from there.
Thank you very much. If I may start by introducing myself. My name is Bahame Tomnyanduga. I'm a student of the 70s. I joined the Faculty of Law, nowadays they call it the School of Law, 1974. So I was just in the middle of the exit of the first period of the first group of the Walter Rodneys, and I'm sure CJ. It's very humbling to hear us calling him Comrade CJ, which is not common to us in Tanzania. We would have been calling Honorable CJ. So it's very humbling to be here with Comrade CJ. But I happened also to be a student at the time of the Nabuderes, Professor Shivji, and other luminaries such as Professor Harub. In those days, in the Faculty of Law, we had the IDS studies. The social sciences had East African social studies, and it opened up a lot of thoughts among the students at that time. I was actually taken aback, and I asked my colleague here, why did the audience clap when the DVC granted freedom? I was a bit surprised, but then later I understood the context. But if I may say some of the things which happened in those days, and this has to do a bit of the subject which will come later, academic freedom, there was a lot of public debate on the campus. There were seminars. These seminars are actually interesting enough. I'm not talking about the seminars in class, in the faculties. I'm talking about seminars which took place on a Sunday morning. And some of us skipped church in order to attend the seminars, because some of these topics which were discussed at the seminars were not taught in class. So this is how you grow intellectually. So I'm just saying this to just underline the concern or the point that was expressed earlier when the colloquium was being opened in terms of the intellectual freedom on the campus. So this is a very important matter, and I believe this matter will be taken on. Professor Issa did mention that there was a question of even vibali before you 2 or 3 students meet. It's a bit surprising for some of us who were at the university in those days. But the point I wanted to contribute to the discussion around the book, I happen to be, if I may call myself, a practitioner of human rights. And this is because I have served on the African Commission on Human People's Rights. I have been chair of the Commission for Human Rights and Good Governance in Tanzania. And basically the framework was the bourgeois, the Western conception of human rights, albeit that we know the African Charter brought in various aspects of socio-economic rights, as well as certain conceptions of African human rights. But the point I wanted to emphasize here is what I'm hearing about the book, and I have to confess that I did not read the first edition, but I will be reading the second edition studiously. This book should be made one of those compulsory teaching books in our universities. Professor Issa did mention one point in his discussion, the role of violence in governance. Violence as a standard. We are talking about Gaza. You know, 3 key principles in human rights, Western notion of human rights, is dignity, equality, and non-discrimination. When you see the bombings falling on Gaza, and when you hear the disquiet, in Tanzania, in Africa, there's nothing being said about Gaza. It's only in small chat groups on WhatsApp that you come to learn about what is happening around us. But there's silence. And I want to take us back to about 40 years ago when I was here. As the students, we demonstrated in support of liberation in Southern Africa. Professor Casemiro mentioned about the role of Tanzania in the liberation struggle. We used to go, and when we go to Manzese, we are confronted by the police just because we were supporting, and it was unauthorized. We never even sought vibalis. We just wanted to express solidarity with the oppressed people. When it comes to this generation, when you don't hear that solidarity, you wonder what has happened. So I just wanted to emphasize the point of the relevance of this book. Let this book go back and reignite the feeling about what is the role of human rights as described by Professor Issa Shivji. That let's look at the other side of the victim. And I think this is now being clearly seen, as I said, you cannot subscribe to human rights in Gaza and then say there's dignity, there's equality, there's non-discrimination. Actually, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is being torn down in Gaza. International humanitarian law is being torn down in Gaza. It's like these principles which we have been fed, we learned, and we have memorized them. It's like they don't exist. And you really wonder where we are going. So I just want to plead again with the organizers, with the publisher. I'm sure will make enough copies so that they are available to many of us. But in scholarship, in terms of scholarship, this book should be used to bring out the discourse so that people understand the conception which Professor Issa has brought out. I want to thank again all of you, and particularly it has been a privilege to be amongst you. It has been maybe so many years since I was last here. I used to attend Kigoda, but maybe it has been a number of years since I was here last, so it was a privilege. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. I know that there are 2 hands that I need to point out. Is there any female participant who wants to make an intervention? Please, before I take the other 2 hands. I have my colleague from Makerere, and then I have at the back. Okay, so we'll conclude with those ones, make them short, and then go to the lunch.
Thank you very much. Congratulations, Professor Shivji and the publishers for the commendable job. By introduction, I'm Robert Kakuru. I'm not part of the 70s, though the head may deceive you that I'm part of the 70s. I really want to thank the team because this publication, the book is timely, based on the subsisting human rights situation in Africa and beyond, where we are having darkness at noon in very many countries and very many institutions. But I really want to say that maybe as we launch this book, we should be thinking of the next edition, because the violators or the perpetrators of human rights violations are not sitting. It's like they're always in the laboratory doing experiments each day. Each day has a new challenge that is different from yesterday's challenge. And you'll be surprised that as we launch this book today, in various countries, you'll find a very unique situation that is actually not reflected in the current book. Though the principles remain the same, the operating environment is changing every day, and it becomes a very big challenge in terms of how to promote and protect human rights in Africa. But I really want to thank you, and I think I'll get time to read the book and understand its content, but I believe that based on our operating environment, we must remain at it. The environment is changing every day. I thank you.
Thank you very much. At the back. As the mic goes there, I'm informed that I have a little bit more time, so if there's any additional intervention, please feel free to signal me.
Okay. Hello? Okay. I'm not sure if it's audible. My name is Sabato Yamsenda. I'm an assistant to... Hello. Yeah. Now it's audible. My name is Sabato Yamsenda, an assistant lecturer in the Department of Political Science and Public Administration. I would also like to join those who have spoken to commend Comrade Issa, as we call him, for the second publishing of the book. I think I heard Advocate Nyanduga recommending the book to be compulsory. And I actually have to say that I first saw and read the book as an undergrad student. It was a compulsory book, and I believe it still is, in a third-year course in political science, human rights. It's PS 342, so it still is. We tried to read it. It was difficult to understand back then, and of course there is a problem, which is part of, it's a university-wide problem. The reading culture among students has eroded, so we need to encourage our students to read it, and those who can adopt it in their courses should, but it's already being read at this university in political science specifically. Also, maybe to go by what Comrade WILLY Mutunga had started about the young people in Nairobi who are keeping the spirit of the 60s and 70s alive. That is not only happening in Nairobi, it's also happening in Dar es Salaam. I remember actually in East Africa. So the comrades that he's mentioning in Nairobi, for instance, are part of what we call the Ujamaa Collective, which brings together grassroots organizations, organic intellectuals from the left, from Tanzania, Kenya, and other African countries. So we meet annually. For instance, this year the meeting is going to be in Tanzania. It rotates. Initially it was rotating between different African countries, but now it's between Kenya and Tanzania. So everything that is happening in Kenya is also taking place in Tanzania. But of course, I must say that the comrades in Kenya are also very good at making their work public, but we are also trying in Tanzania. So for instance, we have a comrade who will speak tomorrow, I think Comrade Tina, who is the chair of a cooperative, a grassroots organization. Comrade Issa has been championing the idea of building commons. I hope we'll have an opportunity next time to talk about that, because it's his new theoretical but also a practical recommendation on the way forward. So Comrade Tina, for instance, is involved in building cooperatives from below, democratic cooperatives, which have been very dear to Comrade Issa's theorization. I've also seen in the timetable Comrade Kido, Jasper Kido is here around, who will be reciting, is an advocate, but also a poet, so he'll be reciting a poetry later. He's also very critical, always, of the University of Dar es Salaam. So that 1970s spirit is not dead. The ideological classes are still alive, and the young people are keeping this legacy alive, and they are going a step further, to take this knowledge, not necessarily to take, but to create organic links between the university and the grassroots, building organizations, engaging in the organizations of the masses. The generation of the 60s and 70s, if you look at their writings, most of them were in English, for instance. The younger comrades are going a step further in trying to either write summaries of the same writings in Kiswahili, or even coming up with new writings. Maybe I should also blow my own trumpet. I have collected and edited 2 books. One of it is Wavuja Jasho Dhidi ya Soko Huria, which is a collection of essays that have been narrated by different people, like working people. The concept of working people, which has been very dear to Issa's theorization. So you will find there are essays written by motorcycle taxi drivers, boda, bajaj drivers, peasants from rural areas who are suffering from dispossession and all that. And then, small-scale manners and all, like the concept of the working people in Tanzania. And recently, we have written another one, which is a quasi-academic book called Wamachinga na Hakijiji nchini Tanzania. The struggle, basically the street vendors and the struggle for the right to the city in Tanzania. Drawing on the same critique of the concept of human rights and trying to re-articulate it as now an ideology of resistance. And it's also in Swahili, and it is being adopted by different organizations and used as tools for pedagogy of the oppressed, whether by peasant organization and other organizations, trade unions and others. So that fire is still alive, Comrade Issa. Nothing is dead, and I have to assure you that the young generation will keep this alive. I also have to thank our principal, Professor Noe. She has been very committed. I was actually talking to one of the college leaders saying, what are we going to do so that in the next 10 years, the story shouldn't always be talking about within nostalgia, about the 60s and 70s, but about the present, She has been very committed to make sure that we revive the spirit of the 60s and 70s by organizing seminars, opening the doors which are otherwise being closed to debate. I know I'm a staff of the university, so I don't want to sound very critical. It might be even risky to do that. It might not be even popular because we are also allergic to these critical discussions, even amongst ourselves, meeting like we meet, we don't meet regularly to even debate, but she's committed to that, to opening those doors and making sure that we take the university back to its old days, but in a new era. So all that is happening, and I am sure in the next few years, that will be back to its feet, thanks to all these efforts by academics and grassroots activists. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I never have a chance to be as generous with time as I have today. If there is no additional... okay, there you are. I'll make that the last one.
Okay, thank you very much. My name's Julius Ntwenya. I'm the president for the Academic Staff Association of Tanzania. We call it a SAPOCT. They read this question like, how are we taking the work of Professor Shivji? Our plan is to invite Professor Shivji next year in January to speak about academic freedom and human rights. And during that month, we'll also celebrate the work, the academic life of Professor Shivji. He will be having an opportunity to speak to more than 40,000 students and the academic community at the University of Dodoma. So whoever is seated here, you are invited. Professor, please plan to come. Last month, we had our council meeting, and we made a resolution that we must make the work of the academics, the academic staff, known and known to everybody. Professor, in your presentation, you described how life has been difficult. Getting permission to have symposium, seminars, etc., etc. I want to assure everyone seated here that the life hasn't changed much. We are still experiencing the same. I've been a president as a student, also a chairperson for the Academic Staff Association for 4 years, a senator, member of the council, and now the president for the Academic Staff Association. So the life is not different. We have a beautiful baby or babies, but who carries this beautiful baby? The legal framework is still not very appealing. If you read the education policy of 1995, the education policy was somewhat giving space, though there's no any mention of academic freedom, but somewhere you can read and find that the space was there. Life has not changed. Universities can make course outlines, curriculums, but there are other decision-making bodies somewhere which will say whether your curriculum is relevant or not. I presume a lot will come. Your work is relevant, so we'll have to push for this agenda. Thank you very much. I submit.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I think we should bring this session to a close. I would like to invite Comrade CJ and Mwalimu Issa Shivji together to go to the tape and cut the ribbon. Beth, I think we have a scissor somewhere, right? Yeah, right there. And then there are a few people who, after that, I would like you to join here for a group photograph. I think it's you are coming in solidarity with the culmination of a real exercise of writing, publishing this book. So, Comrade CJ and yeah, we will join them here. For for the colleagues who already have a copy of the book, please join Mwalimu Shivji and CJ for a group photograph. Those who already have a copy of the book. Those who already have a copy of the book, please. Use mine. Yeah, you can use mine. I deliberately selected Betha Kibona to join that group because she's the first Tanzanian to work at the CODESRIA Secretariat in Dakar. So I want to flag that out. Thank you very much. Keep a copy. Keep the copy. Yes. I want to make one or two announcements before I hand over to Dr. Ngwaza Kamata. The first one is that we have a few copies of the book available on sale outside. I am informed that either 35,000 Tanzanian shillings or $15. They are available out there. I didn't consult Mwalimu Shivji on this, but I have a pen. $15 or 35. Pardon? Actually, in Zimbabwe, they use bond. It's $15 or 35,000 Tanzania shillings. I didn't consult Mwalimu Shivji, but I have a pen. If you get a copy and you want him to autograph, I believe you'll be happy to do that. So please feel free to get a copy. I also want to, therefore, use this opportunity to thank the college and Professor Christine Noe for facilitating this engagement. I want to thank Ngwaza Kamata for being an effective coordinator for this particular event. My two colleagues from CODESRIA, Samuel Fongwa and Betha Kibona, thank you for helping us in this work. I want to recognize the presence of Dr. Mshai Mwangola, who is a member of the CODESRIA Executive Committee, Professor Adebayo Lukoshi, who is a former Executive Secretary of CODESRIA, but the current chair of the Scientific Committee of CODESRIA, and perhaps most importantly also to recognize the presence of Mwalimu Senkoro, former member of the Executive Committee of CODESRIA. I will retire from the podium shortly. Can I request Kamata to come and join us? Thank you very, very much, all of you, for joining us for this occasion to launch the second edition of Professor Issa Shivji's book. It is not the end, it's the start of what we came to do here. Thank you very much, and all the very best.
Thank you, Godwin. We are about to break for lunch, but But since they are still preparing, laying the table, I will take a few minutes to say what I choose to say. And one, in the context of what has been said, is some anecdotes on the past and probably the present. And one that crossed my memory when we were talking about solidarity and humanity, it reminded me of a seminar which was held at what Majamba always likes to call the Faculty of Law, not the School of Law. If he uses the School of Law, he will add formally Faculty of Law. He is nostalgic of the past. And I think they make a lot of sense. Moving from faculty to school and school without schools. I think those who understand what a school means, they will understand. So it's a school without a school. But there was a seminar, I think it's on the 90s, and I was a student. No, it was late 80s. I was an undergraduate. And usually we managed to hold seminars in the evening. And there was one at the Faculty of Law, and Wamba was giving a seminar. And he was sharing his experience when he was arrested and detained by Mobutu Sese Seko. And what he said is that if human beings were like flies, he would have never been released from detention, because flies have no sense of unity, have no sense of solidarity. If you kill one fly, it comes over to the killer. It doesn't have a sense that there's immediately a fly has been crushed and killed. And why? He was saying that because the noises which were made by colleagues, and he was mentioning the University of Dar es Salaam, and if I'm correct, that gave birth, the genesis for the formation, it was a committee of Free Wamba, and that gave rise to UDASA, the birth of UDASA, the University of Dar es Salaam Academic Assembly. So, I don't know, what is happening now, I think we are increasingly becoming flies. And I would say this, for example, in 1990s, students' leaders were arrested here for reasons that I don't want to dwell into. One of them is a minister today of education, Professor Adolf Mkenda. He was arrested. He disappeared. He was following up on the arrest of his president, the university, the campus president here. And then there is the university president, which included the Muhimbili University, which is the university today. It was a faculty. So there was a president. By then I think they were presidents. And I'll come to that, about how students' associations are organized these days. He was arrested. And students didn't go to classes. Okay? They made a lot of noises. He was, I think after, I don't know how long, but almost a week, he was released. So I'm mentioning this to show the importance of solidarity. There was a time, and Zito is sitting there. Zito, is here for different reasons, and I decided to invite him deliberately. He was a student leader, Daruso. It was called Daruso. And I met him in that context of struggles, etc. Students are struggling, and I was in UDASA, and we were trying to find a solution to calm them down. He was a very difficult student leader. to convince on anything. I think he's still a very difficult guy to convince on anything. If he stands for something, then it's very difficult to change him. I think I'm still right, huh? Anyway, but what happened, and this is 1997, Zito as a politician, he was involved in a saga. He made a comment in the parliament, I think. Was it 97? On mining act and the government signing agreement with the investors, etc. And then it became an issue. He was suspended from the parliament. And students were organizing. They invited him. I remember. They invited him to come to speak. He was a forbidden visitor to the university. But you managed to come because I was in consultation with the students. I was not a student leader. I don't know what capacity I had. I was a teacher, and I was in connection with the student. It was DUPSA organizing, which was it's an association which we formed when we were undergraduate students. So we discussed and we say, okay, Nyerere, of course there was some room of freedom because you were not required to request for a room, and so you can maneuver. So they organized it to what is called Nyerere Theater 1. And Zito was somewhere hiding, and then he managed to come. I think they held the meeting. But you can see that freedom from that time slowly was being, I don't know what the word in English, kuminywa. Squeezed. And the most recent cases is where I think Issa said that if you are inviting and you're organizing a talk, it's like the law in Tanzania. If you are a political party and you want to organize a rally, then you have to report to the police and you say what time is your rally going to happen, who is going to speak, etc., etc. So I know some of my students try to organize, and they will be asked who is a guest, who is a speaker, and if you say it's a Shivji, maybe he's a Professor Emeritus, what do we do? Unfortunately, there is nothing we can do about it. He's a member of staff, Emeritus Professor. But if you say Zito now can come. I don't know why. But there was a time if you mentioned Zito, they would say, no. But now you can come. I don't know why. There are people who cannot come easily on campus, as we are talking. If you mention and you say, this is the topic, and the speaker is so-and-so, and they will say, okay, or which day, Independence Day. And I remember that incident. Students were organizing something on Independence Day, 9th December, and they were told, this needs a lot of preparations, and you should consult and make it better. Basically, the students were denied to organize an event on Independence Day. Anyway, I just want to share some of these anecdotes to impress upon you on the state of the academia, and the academic. I think my colleagues just mentioned on who vets. I didn't even think, when you mentioned that if I draw my course outline, someone has to look at it. Actually, it didn't cross my mind that TCU does that in a way. Because in the past, you propose a course, it is Senate of the university which endorses it. But today, no, it has to go somewhere. But this is the beginning of the discussion that we are going to have for the next 2 days. So having said that, now I hope the food is there, because if I say I'm inviting you for lunch and lunch is not there, come back and eat me. So thank you very much, and let us break for lunch.